You know I'm right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, we have a special guest on today. And, I don't even know if I have enough fingers to count how many jobs he has. He's just all over the place. Does what he has to do. I respect the grind. That's what you and I are trying to do to make it happen here. Why don't you tell our guest about who our special guest is today?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a update anchor, does some play-by-play, hosts Nightcap on Sirius XM on Mad Dog Sports Radio. We're going to get to Mad Dog in a little while. We'll ask him some good questions. He joined Sirius in 2009. He's joining us now. Very, very excited to have him on. I know you're excited to have him on, Nick. You're a huge Giants fan, so we'll get to talk about that as well. Mr. Lance Medow. Lance, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And love the introduction. Thanks so much. I'm glad you were able to fit all that stuff into about 20 or 30 seconds. That was a good job out of you.
Thank you.
We did our best, but now we got the whole rest of the show to get through it. So we'll expand and, we'll start, right at the beginning here. When did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in broadcasting? Was it in high school? Was it when you went to NYU and were there in college, or was it something you knew since childhood you wanted to pursue this path?
I think it goes back to childhood. I always had a love for sports. Basketball was always my first love, and I grew up on that sport, playing it more so than thinking about broadcasting. But when you realize that there's not a lot of Muggsy Bogues running around in the NBA, you then start to come to the realization, well, maybe the next best thing is to be associated with the game through the broadcasting lens. And then I think when it really started to come to fruition or become something serious that I wanted to pursue was probably in the early stages of high school, to answer your question. And coincidentally, the New York Liberty, they were running a contest for a kid beat reporter. This was when I was a freshman in high school, if my memory is accurate. And I had to go down to the local mall right in Brooklyn, New York, King's Plaza. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Of course.
Yeah, they were running a contest there to get up in front of a few judges and, give a mock report. And I won the contest, and I was able to cover a few Liberty games that summer. I believe it was between maybe my freshman and sophomore years in high school. And I think that's when I started to realize, hey, this is something that I could actually turn into a profession. And internships came after that. And I think the passion grew from that. But I've always had a love for sports. That was never the issue. The issue was, how could you take sports and make it into something on a professional level if you're not playing? And I think that was probably the turning point now that I look back on things.
No doubt about it. What was your first internship?
First internship was with a company which was a business TV operation. And funny story, my dad has had Knicks season tickets for my entire life. So I grew up going to the Garden, watching games, and there was an individual that had season tickets next to us. So like anything else, when you're in the vicinity of fellow season ticket holders, and this individual ran sort of a business TV operation. So this was an internship I did in high school where, he said, hey, why don't you spend the summer with us? You'll see we do business TV reports and Wall Street and so forth. And I thought that would be a way in to see the TV operation and so forth. So yeah, that was my very first internship, which happened in high school. And then once I went to college, when it's a little bit easier to obtain them because of credits and so forth, boy, I was ultra aggressive because the name of the game, as you guys will realize, is you got to network and you got to meet and greet as many people as possible. So I worked at all of the local TV affiliates here in New York City, WCBS, NBC, ABC. I did a summer with the Brooklyn Cyclones, which is right by where I grew up. And I also worked at various radio stations too. So I tried to get as much hands-on experience as humanly possible. But the first taste was that business TV.
Yeah, as someone who also spent the summer with the Cyclones, I did their weekly YouTube show. Great place to go. Shout out to Gary Perrone, who was the assistant general manager there, and excellent facility there. And now Cyclones are going to be high A. They're going to be having a full season. Yeah. So should be pretty cool to see the Stars of Tomorrow out there. I'm sure it'll be a go-to rehab facility as well. So that's something to look forward to. But, you're speaking about Brooklyn. You're a Brooklyn guy. So we got to ask you, What is your take on L&B?
Wow. Okay. I know we're going to go down this road. Well, anything associated with Brooklyn to me is king. So you could throw out any food you want or any establishment that is associated with the borough of Brooklyn, and I will be all for it. Am I a huge square pizza guy? Is that what maybe you're trying to get out of me? I wouldn't say that I put that at the top of my list, but I do think that it is quality.
I think the Spony Ices from there are outstanding.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And
I have a question for you. I'm a huge pizza guy. I love L&B, but my favorite spots are obviously DeFara's. Everybody loves DeFara's. DeFara's is the Mecca, probably one of the best places in the entire city to go. And I like Grimaldi's. I like Grimaldi's right under the Brooklyn Bridge. I love that place. I love the vibe.
No parking though.
Love that thin pizza. I think it's a really underrated spot.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I've been to all those places. I have no complaints. I mean, I'm a pizza lover. So you combine Brooklyn and pizza, you're not really going to get me to complain about much of anything. And you brought up L&B's. I can't tell you, I probably had at least 2 or 3 birthday parties there during the course of my childhood. So once again, to each your own. But am I a big square pizza guy? No, I wouldn't put that at the top of my list. I like the conventional regular pizza, but you can't go wrong with the ices and the pizza there. So it gets my full seal of approval from that standpoint.
All right, well, let's move on away from pizza. When it comes to sandwiches and other stuff like that, are you a Rolling Roaster guy or are you Brennan and Carr guy?
Oh, I'm a Rolling Roaster guy. I grew up not that far from Rolling Roaster. So, and I can't tell you, now you really guys are getting me hungry here because I haven't been there in quite some time. And then the whole coronavirus thing and so forth. But yes, Rolling Roaster by a landslide. It's not even close.
Yeah, I love Rolling Roaster. My dad worked there growing up, and then I used to go to softball games. We'd go there every time after. Delicious. You can't beat it. But sticking with Brooklyn, we'll transition out of food here. Sorry, Lance. I don't want to make you
no worries.
hungry.
Listen, I love reminiscing. This is great. I don't have these conversations very often, so I'm all for it.
We're going to continue reminiscing, though. We're sticking to Brooklyn. We are fresh out of college. You got your degree, your bachelor's in broadcast journalism. And at the time, there's an ABA basketball team, the Brooklyn Wanderers and Comets, playing in Brooklyn. Where were their games played, and how did you get the opportunity to become the radio voice for that team? And I'm sure you also did some things on the digital side of things with the website, perhaps, because at that time, I think probably in the mid-2000s is when a lot of teams started placing some attention towards websites.
Yeah, it was in the infancy, to your point. So there really wasn't a lot of digital work at that point. But you're right, it was starting to grow. The league as a whole was tapping into that. They played their games at Kingsborough Community College. That's where their games were played. So we had the games on the Kingsborough Community College radio station, which actually has a pretty strong frequency, at least within the confines of Brooklyn, New York. As far as how it came about, like anything else, out of college, hungry to do something. And I noticed that, okay, the ABA is expanding into New York City. There's going to be a presence in Brooklyn. That's my bread and butter. It's my backyard. Why not try to seek out an opportunity? And I reached out to ownership, and they obviously had an interest to put the games on the Kingsborough radio station. And pretty much one thing led to another. It's funny you brought that up because even though that was one of my first gigs, it was also a very memorable experience because ownership changed mid-season because of financial issues, and the original owner was being investigated by the FBI. So, I mean, I got stories till you'd be blue in the face to tell you. So Elton Brand's family took over ownership of the team midway into the season. We continued the broadcast. We were no longer at Kingsborough. They were using another facility. It was then internet broadcast, but that was a wild experience in terms of seeing how a team is run at the very, very low levels and also getting my feet wet in terms of professional broadcasting experience.
Yeah, I think it's obviously great. Yeah, everybody gets their start, and most people start lower, and you work your way up. What you have, so I really respect your hustle. I saw that you simultaneously then during this you are doing some work for MTV. They used to have, and this is I think a perfect example of you never say no. They were doing all different things like celebrity soccer, rock paper scissors, all these college things. So again, like how did that opportunity come about? And what was your thought process when they're saying, all right, you're going to go cover rock, paper, scissors? How'd you study up on that?
Well, the MTV connection came about through NYU because what had happened is at NYU, I was hosting sports talk shows on WNYU, calling play-by-play for men's and women's basketball. And MTV clearly has a presence right in Times Square. And at the time, they were looking to do something with students and March Madness and have a show where they would have students that were into sports and passionate about sports commentate on what was going on in the NCAA tournament. So they contacted WNYU, and a few of us who were associated with the radio station, we did about a 3-week show all throughout the course of the tournament. And that's how the in at MTV begins. And then after that, I stayed in contact with some of the producers and the executives, and one of the executives really liked my work. And once I was out of school, they started to utilize me for special events. So what you brought up, Rock, Paper, Scissors, was an event where I went down to spring break in Florida. They got a platform in the middle of the beach. I've got a bunch of nuts all around me.
Oh my gosh, those spring break shows are wild. I can't believe you were down there.
Insane. And I went down to Florida. I flew down to Florida twice because we did it throughout 2 different weeks of spring break. Because as you know, in the college academic calendar, spring breaks vary depending on what school you go to. So I went down once, and then I went back to New York to do other work, and then came back to Florida. But it was a wild adventure. It was fun. I had a blast. And then we did some additional VOs once I returned to New York. But as far as how you study for something like that, no different than any other sport that you may not have familiarity. You do research, and you also speak to the producers in terms of what they're looking for. The good news about that was it was also a comedic play-by-play / commentary. So I like that because, it enabled me to show my sense of humor and that side of things. And then the celebrity soccer tournament was associated with similar people. And that was more of a conventional sports broadcast. And Pitbull performed live after it. So he came on during the broadcast. Carlos Mencia,
that's
the
wild.
comedian.
Pitbull in his infancy, because there isn't an event Pitbull hasn't sung at. And to think that he was singing it for MTV back then, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was, once again, a very unique experience. So it expanded my horizons. And, when you brought up the fact, well, when do you walk the line of when you say no versus yes? I always keep an open mind because my feeling is versatility is important. You could show somebody that you could do a little bit of everything, then you never know when a future opportunity is going to come up. Maybe somebody has a soccer broadcast 5 years from now and they realize, hey, I've called a soccer game here or there. It may not be a lot of volume, but I've at least been exposed to it. So like when you have weird opportunities, rare opportunities, I think that are offered to you, I think sometimes you got to think through that lens. It may not wow you now, but down the road, it could come out to be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Most guests that Nick and I have had on recently, one of their best pieces of advice has been be versatile, say yes to everything, be open to everything. Obviously, that's worked to your benefit. One quick question, though. You spent quite a few years at MTV. What was your favorite show? Do you have a favorite show? Do you have a favorite show then? Do you still watch it now? Because I know Nick's favorite show. That's my guy. I know his favorite show. I'm curious about what yours is.
MTV. What did I watch? Wow.
Real World guy, Lance?
I wasn't a huge Real World guy. Familiar with the show. Can't say I tuned in that religiously. To answer your question, I don't watch MTV now.
No, of
and
course not.
we're so far removed from when you actually tuned in to watch music videos. I mean, I was at my infancy during that time. It seems like it's been decades since MTV actually showed music videos, which is
Nick
what
is
it was
a
supposed to
challenge
be.
guy. Huge challenge.
Synonymous with that. Now, I could be wrong, guys. You'd have to correct me. I don't know if this was on VH1 or MTV. I did watch a little Beavis and Butthead. I don't remember.
That was MTV.
That was MTV? Okay, so that would probably be something that would come to mind when I was a kid, watched a little Beavis and Butthead.
Awesome. So, during your 5-year period there, you're getting all these other gigs.
Oh, wait, hold on. Are you going to reveal to me what Nick's favorite show is? Well, that was a teaser, and then you just brushed over that.
Well, the challenge is it's a combination of the Real World and Road Rules, right? Over a period of seasons. Now, I don't know how many seasons there are. He's more. I
think you're up to like 28. So I like the challenge. I know, those guys are always big at the spring break shows down there on the stage. And I mean, how do you not like Jersey Shore? I I mean, that's
Of course. I mean, how do you not love Jersey Shore? I mean, if that's not must-see television, I don't know what is.
so
For
those
the
are
record,
those
when I
are
was
my
a kid,
favorite
my
shows.
favorite show was Celebrity Deathmatch.
Celebrity
That's
Deathmatch
another
is
good
really
one too.
good.
I did watch that. That's a good one, Joe. I should have mentioned that. That is a good one. I did watch plenty of that. Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah, Celebrity Deathmatch is awesome. So then, during this time on MTV, obviously you're working a bunch of gigs. So we'll go through some of these here. You're doing high school basketball, and then during that time period, I guess since you're doing basketball, it helped you get the role with Columbia Athletics as well. Talk to us about that time period there, doing high school and then college sports.
Yeah, Columbia was one of my very first opportunities. I actually got that pretty much out of college. I was working at MLB.com, and play-by-play has always been my number one passion. And I had a contact at Columbia, and they were just branching in. This was 2006, the fall of 2006. Columbia, and now most schools have followed, where they were taking the production in-house. They were looking to do their own internet broadcast or their own radio broadcast. Normally, a lot of these schools, they leave it to the student radio stations and they're like, hey, they'll cover it. We're not going to worry about it. So Columbia was looking to bring on more of a professional feel. And they were looking for men's and women's basketball, football. And it was perfect timing where I got out of school that the door opened to start as the women's play-by-play announcer, do updates during football broadcast. Jerry Recco was the men's basketball play-by-play announcer and the football play-by-play announcer. So I worked very closely with him, and little by little, filled in for men's games and so forth. And, now obviously have taken over as the main men's basketball and football announcer. So that was something that came right out of college. Went from calling NYU to calling Columbia. I guess my goal was to conquer the entire New York City basketball market. If that was my goal, perhaps I accomplished that relatively early in my career. As far as the high school basketball network is concerned, here's where, you never know who's going to reach out to you and who's going to contact you. A gentleman who lived in Queens, had a son that was playing high school basketball and was trying to develop a concept. How can we broadcast high school basketball games, put them on the internet? So if you're a high school basketball player, and ESPN wasn't broadcasting a lot of games at this point, how can you show highlights to potential college coaches? Or how can you make it easier for college coaches to scout you? Which I thought was a very interesting concept and intriguing. And he wanted to do local broadcast where he made a deal with a production company and they would come down and set up mics and I'd have a color commentator. Low profile, nothing crazy. We're not talking about 17 cameras, maybe 3 cameras and a TriCaster. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that or your viewers or listeners. And the technology, a TriCaster, is now very popular. I mean, there are major broadcasts that are running out of that, which just goes to show you how far the technology has come. And we would do public school athletic games. I went to Lincoln High School in Brooklyn, New York. So I called some games back at my old high school. We'd go out to Long Island, all the local areas. We'd pick like a high school game of the week and put it up on the internet. And it was very interesting. And then when I eventually joined SiriusXM and the internet phase maybe wore down or it became popular, there were other individuals and production people that were involved in it. I had him connect with Sirius, and for a few years, we did the McDonald's All-American game. We did the play-by-play radio national broadcast of that and some other notable high school games. The Jordan Brand Classic, which was at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. We did a national radio broadcast on Sirius XM. So something that started off as an innocent concept grew little by little, and I was involved in that for many years. So, yeah, I was very thankful for that, combined with Columbia, allowed me to stay consistent on the play-by-play front, at least for basketball.
Yeah,
you were ahead of the curve, big time. Very
absolutely.
Yeah, high school sports is huge now. There's a lot of platforms that popped up, but thinking of TriCaster, I can relate. I do some work with the College of Staten Island. I do their sporting events, and I do camera operation, I do the engineering, and I do color commentary or play-by-play all at the same time. So I love that small feel, and it's just absolutely incredible. I want to shout out the head athletic doctor for Columbia, Dr. Bill Levine, my cousin, great guy, knows his stuff.
Wow.
And shout out to
Jerry Recco,
who was on our show. And I used to intern with him back in the day at WFAN. So it's crazy, Lance. We keep having guests on. Everyone is connected somehow, some way, which is it's just totally awesome. I really appreciate everybody taking their time to come with us always. You mentioned MLB, so I think that to me must have seemed like a pretty cool job. And again, this is where MLB is making their focus on MLB.com, and you were able to do some voiceover highlights there. But tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that was another opportunity that came right out of college. MLB.com and Columbia were my two gigs simultaneously, where I had regular work right out of school. Very fortunate I was able to stay in New York. And here's another example of networking. My professor at NYU, the late, great Michael Ludlum, who was very well known in the New York City radio scene. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but extremely influential on my career to have him as a professor. He taught radio courses, TV courses at NYU, an individual that was extremely passionate about the industry and always looked for his students to succeed. So I have to at least mention him and give credit to him. And he had a former student of his that was working at MLB.com on the production side. And Nick, you summed it up beautifully in terms of, you're right, we were at the very early stages at that point compared to where MLB has grown. And now, to my knowledge, MLB.com doesn't have a presence anymore at our Chelsea, New York City studios. They've moved everything out to Secaucus. Yeah.
Joe does highlights for MLB.com.
All right, so you know better than I do. So there you go. Yeah, but I mean, I could tell you when I started there, we had a big presence, New York City, Chelsea market, right in the heart of Manhattan. Yeah. And they had a whole newsroom with computers, lines of editors cutting highlights. And I would voice highlights for all games. I mean, I would do shifts. We'd be up till 3 a.m. I wouldn't leave because, the West Coast games, they don't slow down for us and so forth. So, yeah, did VO, for the highlights. I'm sure that's something you could attest to, Joe. And I hosted shows, the highlight shows, which were up on MLB.com. I did radio shows, did a little bit of everything. Jack of all trades, on-air talent at MLB.com. And I was there for a number of years. I want to say I was there from 2006, like I said, the first season, right when I got out of college. And I was with them pretty much till I became full-time at Sirius. So I think 2011, and grinding it out every single summer, long hours, all nights, and doing a variety of things. But yeah, that was a big opportunity to be associated with a professional sports league right out of college and get my feet wet. Absolutely. That was a huge opportunity. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I can imagine like how exciting it is growing up a big sports fan and right out of college, you're working for Major League Baseball. I mean, and you're doing on-air work, which is absolutely incredible. And we're going to get to Sirius here, but you had to stop. You were there for a number of years with Sports Center, and you were doing the updates, the anchoring, Sports Center anchoring. What was that experience like? How did you, again, get that opportunity? And then what are some of the shows you worked on as the update anchor?
Yeah, I did stuff up in Bristol, Connecticut for ESPN. I was really used as a freelance anchor where it would be holiday shifts or where some of the regulars took off. They would turn to me to come in. I want to say I worked a variety of shows. I mean, to tell you there was one main show in particular, I think would be misleading. I can't even tell you who the hosts were at the time because it was so varied. But as far as how the opportunity came about, sent a demo. Nice. To the necessary people at ESPN, and fortunately it caught their attention. Got a phone call back, went up, did a few demos, and then they started to utilize me on a regular basis on the holidays. Is just another way to get involved in a major network. And I mean, just to see the setup there in Bristol was unreal. I mean, the campus feel and how they got a different building for every different entity of that operation. And yeah, it was an opportunity to be involved with sports talk shows, learn how to structure an update, be exposed to different technology in terms of incorporating sound, which is stuff that then I would be exposed to later on in other walks of life. And just another attractive piece to put on the resume. That's how I looked at it. I mean, it's certainly not fun commuting from New York City to Bristol, Connecticut. I will tell you that. I don't know if you guys have been up there or you speak to individuals. You can understand people who work there regularly. They live in that area for a reason, because you do not want to have to make that commute every other day or whatever.
I imagine it's not like a 3-hour drive each way or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I think that helped you. I'm here just looking at your background, but you're doing updates there. Did that help you get into the door with Westwood One Radio Network, knowing that they know you already have the update experience?
I want to say, in terms of the time frame, I believe I was already at Westwood One, Nick, before I actually started doing Sports Center updates. And Westwood One, it was a very similar manner. Sent the demo, and from there things branched out, because my first opportunity at Westwood One, the reason why, if I'm having everything in the perfect timeline, it's hard to remember all the details, given there's been so much, to your point. But my first opportunity at Westwood One, if memory serves me correct, was the 2008 Summer Olympics, where I was doing updates for all of the national broadcasts for Westwood One. And I want to say that the first opportunity at ESPN may have been earlier that year or may have been after that summer. One way or another, they were very much in close communication with one another. So I don't know if I would say one led to another. I think it was just a matter of whatever I was working with on my demo at that time caught the attention of both entities.
Yeah, from just as a listener, it seems like recently you've done some more sports, but it seems like you've always done a lot of college basketball with Westwood One. Is that something where they, for like, hey, we see you're doing great stuff with Columbia, would you like to give this a try with some other teams?
Yeah, it was absolutely a combination of that. The individual certainly knew that I had been doing play-by-play for other places, but it was also my aggressiveness and, dangling the carrot out there. Hey guys, I do play-by-play. Remember me? You could use me for something else. And that's why I can't speak highly enough of Westwood One and Howie Deneroff, who runs the operation, a tremendous influence on my career, and a guy who's opened up so many doors, because he does a great job in grooming talent. And when he sees something in you, he's not going to shy away from giving you a golden opportunity. So yeah, to answer your question, it went from doing updates in the Summer Olympics to then hosting in the studio, which I still do, and then showing, okay, you can use me from a play-by-play standpoint. So yeah, I think it was part of them seeing stuff in me in addition to my aggressiveness.
Awesome. So then I guess simultaneously, as you're, starting off with Westwood One, you get a great job. I don't know if you were, a big football fan or whatnot growing up, or Giants fan, but the Giants, they hire you with WFAN to, do their pre-game, post-game, halftime show. You're also working on Big Blue Kickoff, which is, the Giants' daily weekday show. You're doing call-in shows again for the website. Giants are going like all in here with the digital media. So they're just like, Lance, he's a great talent, and we'll just let him do everything under the moon here, which I think is awesome. But how did that Giants opportunity come about? Obviously, you're still there. It's been a great match, and how much have you enjoyed this particular role?
Yeah, it's been fantastic working for the Giants for all these years. That opportunity also started in 2008. And similar to Westwood One, Nick, it's interesting when you break down everything I've done. It's a very similar evolution, I would say, with the Giants, because I was initially brought in. They were looking to branch out digitally, as you just alluded to, and they wanted to have a presence on their website while games were going on, meaning they were going to stream the play-by-play, but they couldn't stream commercials. So they wanted somebody to come in between the commercial breaks of the game, provide analysis, and also do a pregame and a postgame. So I did that for a number of seasons, and that's how I got my foot in the door starting in 2008. Then 2013, by that time, Big Blue Kickoff Live started, and I was regularly doing a call-in show. I believe that started in 2010 or 11. And then 13, the opportunity for working on the WFAN Giants Radio Network presented itself. And like anything else, always dangling the carrot out there. Hey, I'm willing to grow. If you need me for something, always willing to do more. And yeah, since 2013, I've been in that spot, and that role has evolved in terms of how we structure our pregame, our halftime, and our postgame shows. The individuals that I've worked with has also altered and changed here or there, but it's been a great ride to be associated with an NFL team, to be able to cover one of the most popular professional sports. And to, once again, I can't stress this enough, to be able to stay in the market that I grew up has been extremely important to me. I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly. Okay. I was born and bred in Brooklyn, New York, as I mentioned here, guys. Not to say that I'm never open to leaving, but there's a connection here unlike any other place. And I know this market better than any other place. And the fact that I've been able to grow and mature as a broadcaster within this market means an absolute lot for me, because I have family, I have friends, and to be uprooted in this industry, sometimes you have to do that, especially if that could lead to something else later on in life. And that to me has been something that's been extremely fortunate, and I don't take that lightly at all.
Absolutely. That leads really well into my next point. When you were doing all this work simultaneously for ESPN, for Westwood One, for the New York Giants, you were still in your 20s, right? You were still trying to find yourself a little bit. They say your 20s are hard. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But Nick and I are very much in a similar spot right now in our lives, in our careers. My co-producer and one of my great pals over there, he just got married last year. His 1-year wedding anniversary came up. So, shout out to him. But my question is,
getting a shout out on my own show. I never thought I'd get that.
As you were doing all of this, you were doing a bunch of traveling. I'm sure you had to drive around. I don't know if you were living in the same spot. From a life perspective, how hard was it for you to juggle all of this? And what do you think was the hardest thing that you had to bear the responsibility of, as you were doing all this?
Oh, it's a great question, Joe. I'd say that it's part of my work ethic that maybe is the one thing that's most troubling, because I'm always on the grind. I'm always hungry. I've just always been an extremely motivated individual. So I would say the toughest challenge for me, and it still stands to this day, is finding a way to remove myself from work and balancing a social life with the yearning for having that void in the professional mold, filled on a consistent basis. And I don't have the right answer or great advice to tell everybody, because it's something I still struggle with. Because when you're not doing something, you're always thinking about the next thing, right? That you could be going after. Or when you're not doing something, somebody else out there is trying to grab your gig. So what can you do to make sure that you protect yourself? It's something I struggle with every day. I'll be wholeheartedly honest with you. So I would say that has been by far the biggest professional challenge. It's not handling the work, because if you love the work and you're passionate about it, it doesn't always feel like work. It just feels like you're combining your love for something with doing work. I would say the biggest challenge for me is, when do you learn to take a step back? When do you learn to digest everything, and it's okay to not be working 24/7? So, I'll give you an example. Everybody needs an out or an outlet to, just take their minds off of something. Sometimes I don't want to sit down and watch a sports game. Okay. Mm-hmm. I like taking a step back. So, I'm very passionate about film, and I watch a lot of movies, and that's something on the side that's unrelated to sports that, I like for 2 hours. I don't have to think about anything sports related. I don't want to analyze a game. I don't want to prepare a play-by-play chart. I just want to have time for myself and so forth. So I hope that answered your question, Joe. I don't know if that was on point, but yeah,
No,
it wasn't
on point.
It wasn't really so much the challenge of balancing the work, especially if you're regimented and you have a schedule. And listen, there's some weeks where you've got a football broadcast that I got to prepare for. I got 2 play-by-play games. I got a Columbia football game, a Columbia basketball game. I mean, it makes your head spin. But once again, you learn as you go through the week. Okay, Monday, I got to take care of this. Tuesday, I got to take care of that. So, I mean, to me, once again, it's more of balancing life with work. That, I think, has been by far the biggest challenge, especially when you work for various different outlets.
Yeah, if you're a movie fan, you got to check out the Cinephile podcast with Adnan Virk. He used to be at ESPN. He's now at MLB Network and DAZN, but that's a crazy. I think you'd like that just because he's a sports guy and he loves his movies as well. But good recommendation there for you.
I will check that out. Yeah.
I think you're talking like adjustments and really taking things day by day. If I'm not mistaken, with the Giants radio stuff with pregame, postgame, for road games, we're usually in the Hudson Street studio at WFFAN, and at home games you were broadcasting from right outside the stadium. Is that correct? And how has that changed due to COVID-19?
Correct. For regular life operating, we were outside on the stage, right outside MetLife Stadium for our pregame. and then I would work out of the broadcast booth for halftime and post game. So for every home game, always at MetLife Stadium. And then for all road games, I was always operating out of WFAN studios. As far as how things have changed for this season, well, I have yet to be at the MetLife Stadium at all because everybody really needs to be separated. Everybody can't be on top of one another. So I have been all alone in the WFAN studios for each and every one of our Giants broadcasts this season. And I've made the best of it. I have no problem because, we've been doing all the road games out of that. And it's comfortable from my standpoint because, as really the point guard of the operation, which to me is the best parallel. And, I'm kicking it out to 75 different individuals, it seems at times. Communication is important. So the fact that I have my producer with me on the opposite side of the glass, we could visually see each other, we could communicate in my ear. That to me is important. So even though everybody's had to make adjustments, I'm very thankful with this setup because I think it's made my life a lot easier and it's kept things as smooth as possible.
Yeah, I think the crew is just awesome. When I was an intern at WFAN, one time I had the honor of bringing Jeff Fiegels his Chinese food for lunch in the middle of the show. So that was pretty big for me as a big
That's
Giants
some
fan.
honor.
And Paul Dottino is just awesome. I think if you slice this guy open, it'd be blue blood coming out because he's just all about the Giants all the time, Lance. But how is it working primarily with those two, but the whole crew overall, of course, Bob Pop and Carl Banks as well?
Yeah, a great group overall. There's no doubt about it. Jeff, I clearly have worked extremely closely with since 2013 because he was my main co-host when I took over as the Giants pre-half and post-game host. And I've loved working with Jeff. Such an easy guy to get along with, passionate about football, and, is always looking to give to his fellow co-hosts. So I respect the hell out of Jeff, love working with him. That's been an absolute pleasure. And Paul is a very unique individual, as you hinted at, Nick. I mean, I don't know how much to put it in a different way. I mean, you said awesome. I'd say that's one way to put it. I wholeheartedly agree with your synopsis. I think if we did cut Paul Dottino up in pieces, he'd still find a way to put himself back together, by the way. But yeah, he would absolutely bleed out blue. I talked about trying to balance life and work. Try figuring out how he does that outside of the Giants, because I know that if he's not watching film or he's not thinking about something big blue, I can't even tell you what he would occupy his mind with. So all I'm thankful for is I'm thankful that there was an NFL season this year, knock on wood, because if he did not have an NFL football outlet, I don't know where he would be from a mental standpoint, as you brought up that topic. And the fact that you opened that door, I had to at least say that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was working the first XFL Guardians game, and I saw him there. I was shocked he was there. I guess he missed MetLife Stadium, so we got in there. I know he has done some Northeast Conference college basketball as well. But we're actually gonna pull on our show in a few weeks, so we'll let him know your synopsis to him and see.
Yeah,
if he
just
agrees.
mentally prepare yourselves, guys. Okay, don't tell me that you haven't been warned by Lance Medow here before you get ready for that. Okay, you got to be in a very good mental place for that conversation because that could go just about anywhere.
Speaking of getting mentally prepared, you go to Sirius XM. So before we even talk about your career there, I got to know, did you ever meet the Mad Dog, and what was that like?
Absolutely. Oh, I did updates on Chris's show for a number of years. I've had many interactions with him. I mean, Chris is a great guy.
Absolutely.
He's got his shtick. He's got his persona, as people who grew up in New York City know. And not to say that he's a bad guy on air either, but when the mic shuts down, Chris is, such a warm individual. The best example I could give you, when the coronavirus obviously wasn't plaguing our entire country, normally he would take out the entire Mad Dog Sports Radio staff around this time of the year. We'd have a holiday dinner and we'd go out right around the Sirius studios, and it would be on him. So the guy's got a tremendously deep heart. Any conversation, interaction that I've ever had has been pleasant. He's been very giving in terms of his time and his advice. So yeah, I have had no bad interactions whatsoever. It's been a pleasure to know Chris. It's been a pleasure to interact with him. And once again, he's a very unique individual on and off the air. There's no doubt about it. He's old school. He still reads his newspapers, so I give him a lot of credit for that. God forbid he embraces technology, would be like pulling teeth. But that's the Mad Dog in a nutshell, essentially.
Yeah, love watching him at High Heat and LB Network as well. That was one of their best hires. Unbelievable energy off the off the charts. But I want to know, how did you get started there with the network? And at that time when you started, was Mad Dog still the head of the station? Was he the one doing the interviews at that time? And now also, like, fast forward now, 12 years later, you're basically bouncing around doing all these different shows. How do you, mentally prepare when it's like, all right, Monday you might be doing this, Tuesday you're doing something else, Wednesday you're doing this, one day you're doing mornings, one day you're doing nights. How do you, put your game face on and get in the zone when you're going into battle?
Yeah, you got to remain flexible, number one, based on what you just laid out. And you got to keep up on just about every sport, because you never know where the conversation's going to go. On Mad Dog Sports Radio, it's an all sports station. So I can talk about anything. I can talk about baseball, football, basketball, college, you name it. And then when I'm doing NFL shows, now I'm just zoned in on the National Football League. So I think staying on top of all sports, getting a feel for the major headlines and storylines, that is probably the most important thing. And I mean, as far as the schedule is concerned, it's no different than what I've been doing my entire professional career. Staying ready, being flexible, knowing one day you work in the evening, another day you work in the morning. So I don't know if that necessarily has been a huge adjustment from that standpoint. As far as coming in, I came in really when Mad Dog Sports Radio was just about beginning. The station started in 2009, if I have my calendar accurately, and I came in right around the summer. So I want to say the station was operational for 7-8 months by then. And the way that I came into Sirius was I met Steve Torrey, who is the program director of the channel and still operates in that role. We worked together at Westwood One. We were both covering the Summer Olympics. So that was my first interaction with Steve. And when then he joined Sirius with Chris, and they started out on Mad Dog Sports Radio, that channel, in 2009, because we had an established relationship, I had reached out to him, and they were looking to bring in a variety of people. So that's really how the door opened to Sirius XM. And then since I've been there, to what you alluded to somewhat, Nick, the channels have grown. Right. They've brought on college channels. I mean, when I first came there, it was NFL. I don't even know. I think MLB did exist. Mad Dog. NBA did not exist at that point. They certainly didn't have the various college conferences. I don't even think fantasy sports radio existed. And I don't even know if NASCAR existed at that point. So since I've joined there, they've added tons of other channels.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him, but we had Keith Irizarry on this show. Yeah, he did updates there as well. So, everybody we talked to has just awesome words to say about the place. And any, if you're going to be doing any 2021 Olympics coverage at all with Sirius XM?
I don't know what 2021 presents in terms of the Olympics from Sirius XM standpoint, but I do know, normally they take a lot of Westwood One's coverage. Right. So assuming that the Olympics will be operational in 2021, I certainly hope to be involved from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's hopefully the goal. Hopefully we see the Olympics. I think that's what I'm looking forward to. Now, one question I wanted to ask you, because you don't really see it too often, where, I mean, basically you're doing 5 jobs at a time, and they could all be within the same time period. How do you, I guess, go to your bosses and, manage your schedule? Like, how do you, obviously they know Sundays you're unavailable, you're doing Giants, but how do you work that out with Westwood or Mad Dog? That's like, oh, I got to do a Columbia basketball game tonight and I can't work here, or I'm doing the serious shift, so I can't do the play-by-play on Westwood One. How do you work that out? And is everybody really understanding, I guess, the programming directors?
Yeah, everybody has been very understanding and cooperative. So I am certainly thankful for that. I mean, like anything else, it really comes down to the beauty of sports is more often than not, things are well laid out and planned months before. So, it's not as if you're walking into the week of and you're like, oh boy, we've got to make changes. So, as long as there's enough leeway to lay out to people, okay, hey, these weekends, this day, I'm going to be tied up with this, or, if you give Columbia a heads up, there's a conflict with the Giants so that they could plan accordingly. At least it gives me some flexibility from that standpoint, because the schedules are put out so much in advance. I mean, for example, we usually know the Giants schedule. It comes out normally late April, early May. So, to give people an advance notice of what's going to happen in September, And the Columbia schedule normally comes out middle of the summer. So basketball starts November, football starts September. And, fortunately, especially from the weekend standpoint, I've been doing morning shows on Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio. So that gives me, just by the structure, the opportunity to double up. So, I'll get done with my show at 11 a.m. and then I can go to do a play-by-play event, or I can do something with the Giants. I mean, the layout of the land from that standpoint gives you some flexibility. The other beauty is the technology. And, we were talking about the TriCaster earlier. I invested in my own unit, which is something portable that I could take if I'm on the road doing a play-by-play broadcast. As long as there's reliable internet, I could still host a Sirius show remotely. So that, Nick, to answer your question, also doesn't overwhelm me from a scheduling standpoint if you don't then have to miss anything, even though you're not in the studio or you're not in New York City. The technology has done wonders for this industry. And that also has been a huge luxury to at least be able to turn to.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I also wanted to ask you is, you have ample experience doing live play-by-play. You host your own show, right? You host the show on Sirius. So take us through how you prepare for each, because they're both different, very, very different animals to tackle. One, I would assume, obviously, you're digging into stats. You're digging into player info, player updates. The other one, you're on top of what's going on during the day. I'm sure you're talking with other producers there. Definitely two different animals. Most, I think, with the way the sports industry is now today, there's definitely some overlap when it comes to talent. If you could do one thing, chances are you'll probably be able to at least transition and be able to do another thing. So just for our listeners, tell us how the preparation for each is very, very different.
Yeah, it's a great point, Joe. I would say sports talk, when you're doing a show, to me at least, the way that I approach it is, I'm not really cramming the day of. I look at it as everything I do is preparing for the show. Reading an article about a major story is preparing for a show, because you're absorbing information that you may wind up talking about or analyzing. Watching a movie or keeping up with entertainment news could be preparing for a sports talk show, because sometimes I'm not going to necessarily focus on sports. I may talk about something connected to sports, but is related to pop culture. So I guess the way that I prepare for a sports talk show is literally everything I do, because anything that I'm interacting with on a given day, when I'm preparing for the Giants or I'm studying up on an opponent, that can help me with an NFL radio show. We may be doing a segment on the Cleveland Browns, right? So just because they're playing the Giants doesn't mean that it may not be helpful on a Mad Dog show or an NFL show. So it's a matter of staying on top of the latest headlines, glancing at some of the sports websites. Obviously, you live and die on social media because you're always looking to see whether there's breaking news, and taking notes. I'll give you an example. I do a segment on my Sunday Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio show. It's called Thoughts and Prayers. It's not meant to be taken seriously. I make fun of the phrase thoughts and prayers, okay? Because how everybody throws that out every time you feel sorry, thoughts and prayers. So I get sort of tired of hearing the phrase. So I figured, how can I incorporate that into my show? So I poke the bear at fans when, they lose a heartbreaking game or a player complains about something. I'll put that in my thoughts and prayers segment. So there may be something that comes up on a Tuesday that I may want to use in that segment on Sunday. So I'll jot it down. Oh, I came across this article. Hey, this is something I want to keep in mind. And, you're taking notes every single day. You're accumulating things. To me, it's an ongoing process. That's how I look at preparing for a sports talk show. As far as play-by-play, 100%, Joe, it's a completely different animal, completely different beast. Similar in terms of you're not doing everything in one day. I put it to the equivalency of studying for a test. When I was in school, I wasn't a cram guy where, the night of, you're going to try to digest everything. Little by little, you'd go over your notes. Little by little, you read the pages in the textbook that are important. Play-by-play is the same thing. Monday, I may prepare my chart for one team. Tuesday, I'm going to prepare my chart for another team. Wednesday, I'm going to read the game notes. And then Thursday may be the game. I'm going to do it little by little so that it's like studying for a test, and I'm absorbing things. And the way that I work off of play-by-play is I have a computerized sheet. So I'm typing it up And while I'm typing it up and putting stats and notes, that's a way that I learn it. That's the way that I absorb it. I know, not to poo-poo on anything, but I know that there's some companies where, you could subscribe to, they'll fill out your sheets for you, they'll give you everything. I don't like that, because the process of preparing my play-by-play sheets is the process of learning and preparing for the game, so that it becomes second nature. Because when you're calling a radio game play-by-play, you don't have the time to look down at your sheet every 5 seconds. By the time I look down at my sheet, they could have passed the ball 3 times and then I miss a bucket. TV is a little bit different. You have a little bit more leeway to maybe look down, glance at a note. When you're calling the game on the radio, it goes so quickly, you can't do that. So you have to make sure you're memorizing and studying like a test. So I would say very detailed oriented compared to a sports talk show, because also when I'm doing a sports talk show, and I apologize for giving you the long-winded answer, you can tell.
We like it.
This is all valuable information. This is really, really important. And I was going to ask you about how your process is when it comes to note-taking. Do you keep notebooks? Do you keep sheets or anything? Do you use your own? Do you use the company sheets? Because everybody uses different, there's a different methodology to doing all these different things, but you're answering everything perfectly. I really, really sincerely think this is very valuable to anybody who's listening to this.
No, and I'm glad to hear that. As far as to answer your last question, I'm very unique. Once again, I'm a computer guy. I don't like writing things out. I like sitting at the computer. So everything is computerized. I'll type out my notes. And the beauty is, when I'm doing a show, I could have my laptop in front of me, like I'm talking to you guys right now. So I don't have to print out 75 papers. I could just have my screens, and I could, have them laid out. So everything is computerized based. Of course, I'm going to print out my sheets when I do a play-by-play game, because I'm not going to utilize my computer. God forbid the technology breaks down. So that I'll print out, but everything's computerized for me. I know some people use, manila folders, and they like to write on that. Everything is computerized and printed out, and I operate off of the technology in the computer. That's what I do. So I create my own sheets, essentially, as opposed to utilizing, Joe, somebody else's format.
Yeah, I think that, especially when you're doing college sports, it's got to be a lot more preparation, and you got to really dig deep. So it's much better to put things out on your own there. Now, you mentioned, the radio shows, and you got to how to prepare for those. Has there ever been an incident? So has there ever been an incident where you're doing a radio show, or you're doing one of the interactive Giants call-in shows, that a caller has just thrown you off your feet, like you don't know what they're talking about? And how do you handle some crazy callers? Because I'm sure in all of your years on radio, you've had experience some.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's always crazy callers, Nick. There's no doubt about that. Normally, to answer your question, I've got my hand right next to the clicker on drop, okay? That would be my response, okay? That's the way that I handle a crazy caller or a nut caller. Because, yes, there's always characters in terms of sports talk radio. What I usually try to do is a caller, this is just my philosophy, a caller should never dictate your show, okay? You're the one steering the ship. Now, that doesn't mean that the callers are not going to contribute anything, and that the callers may add something. And I always love it when a caller, and I love this, when a caller maybe brings an angle up that you either didn't get to yet, or you weren't thinking of, and then something pops into your mind, and you're like, oh, well, now I can take the conversation to a completely different area. So they're valuable from that standpoint. But to your point, Nick, when they jump off the deep end, or they bring up something that is just completely unrelated, or is just crazy and out there, and they're living on Pluto, I always turn to humor, okay? And I just try to turn it into something comical, something that maybe would entertain the audience from that standpoint, and play off of that to then get us back on track. And part of the comedy may be, of course, dropping them in the process, okay? I'm not gonna lie, I've got a quick trigger. You gotta know that if you tune into my shows. But I always feel as if when you give the caller the power to dictate your show, that's when you get into trouble. So I think you've got to trust your game plan, what you went into a show, what you want to talk about. And like anything else, you've got to be able to ad lib, and you got to be able to adjust and, look at the situation, assess the situation, and react accordingly. So humor, I think, is a very strong weapon, for the lack of a better phrase, or there's nothing wrong with dismissing it and then moving back on. Because once again, I don't think callers should dictate the content of your show. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, you never know when a sour shoe is going to call in, start giving you impersonations, and
I love what he does. So yeah, No, you don't. I mean, Sour Shoes to me, I wouldn't put in that category, Joe, because I mean, he's entertaining and I think you know where he's coming from. You know what's funny? It's funny you brought him up because he's called into the Giants post-game
Oh my
shows
gosh.
before. But as just a normal guy, you know,
Really?
not Sour Shoes, just hey, wants to talk about Giants, which I love, which is great. So, you know, you never know what you're going to get. But I'm talking about people that I guess the way that I interpreted your question, Nick, was somebody who may call into a show with an agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Meaning that, okay, they want to poke at you. They want to disturb the flow. You always need to be prepared for that. That's, I guess, how I interpreted your question. So my response was more geared towards that.
No, absolutely. Spot on.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun. I think there was a lot of valuable information here. And like you have thoughts and prayers. Nick and I, we haven't named the end of the segment yet, but we always give our guests the last word, right? So once again, Lance, thank you for coming on and doing this with us. We had a lot of fun. We hope to have you on again very, very, very soon in the future. Hope you and your family stay safe. Obviously, there's a huge semi-blizzard going on right outside our windows. Big time snowstorm. There's a pandemic going on outside. So we hope you guys stay safe. Very Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. If there's anything you want to share, if there's anything you want to promote, the floor is all yours. Go right ahead. Thank you once again for doing this, Lance. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the program. I mean, this was really nice. It was a change of pace to be able to reminisce and look back on my career and also talk about the industry as a whole. So I want to thank the two of you for allowing me to come on to this platform. Really enjoyed the conversation. I echo all of the sentiments that you laid out, Joe. I hope your families are safe and healthy, and I hope you survive this blizzard as well. It was nice to get, I guess, our attention off of what's going on outside our windows and being able to focus on sports on the big picture perspective. As far as promotion, you know, I'm not a big promotional guy. If people want to follow and interact with me on Twitter, I certainly welcome that. I'm at Lance Medow. Last name is, of course, Medow. There's no A in the last name. I make sure to emphasize that because people just love to butcher the last name and make the assumption that there's an A in my last name. And other than that, I'd be more than happy to come on anytime you guys want me again. So feel free to reach out. More than happy to do it.
Lance, I really appreciate it. And I hope in 2021, when I get to the Giants game, I see you. I can wave to you. I'll see you in person. You and Jeff taking care of business on the pregame show. Love walking in, seeing you guys right there. The fans always enjoy that, right in that fake little field out there. It's always a tradition to come into the game. So looking forward to hopefully doing that in 2021.
Absolutely. Don't hesitate. Feel free to come on over. I love talking with fans in between commercial breaks. So you, the listeners, if any of them are Giants fans, you come to a Giants game, don't be shy. Come over to the stage. Be more than happy to chat. So I'm glad to hear, Nick, that you've at least visually seen us. Hopefully we'll be able to visually see each other in person at a sporting event in the near future.
We'll see. We can only hope, but we really appreciate it, Lance. Some great advice for us and for all of our listeners as well. Thanks for taking a trip down memory lane with us, and of course, sharing your thoughts on some institutions in Brooklyn when it comes to food. If we got a Brooklyn guy on, we got to talk about the food. So thank you for that. But that's going to do it here for this episode. So for our very special guest, Lance Medow, make sure you're not spelling his last name wrong if you're going to follow him on Twitter. It's Lance Medow, Medow. That's it right there. Follow him on Twitter. And for my co-host, Joe Calabrese, this has been You Know I'm Right.